last course of the semester, right? Last week of classes. We're going to deal today with prosody. So we're still dealing with phonetics and phonology, actually, because prosody is a field of phonetics, right? But still, that's something a bit apart. So far, we've worked on sounds, on individual sounds, so phonemes, if you remember well, that's what we call the phonemes. And when we're studying the phonemes, we say that there are segments. So the phonemes are also called segments. So when you study the phonemes, we say we are at the segmental level of the speech. When you study something which goes beyond the phonemes, that is a syllable, a word, or the whole sentence, then in that case, we say that we are at the suprasegmental level. Okay? So it's beyond the segment, beyond the phoneme, it's suprasegmental level. So we consider the sentence or the word, and not just individual sounds. So that was for the technical words. In case you see these kind of words in your readings, you know what does it refer to. So, do you have any idea of what is prosody, actually? No? Not a clue? Any guess? Nothing? No? So prosody is linked with the oral language, right? It's not linked with the written language. It's the oral language, right? So that's the first thing. You're going to hear something and you're going to tell me your impression, okay?
Monsieur Seguin n'avait jamais eu de bonheur avec ses chats qui les perdaient toutes de la même façon un beau matin, cassaient leurs portes, s'en allaient dans la montagne et là-haut le loup les mangeait.
Did you understand anything? A few words, maybe? Yeah, more or less. Why? Do you know why? You recognize the language. Yes, it was French. But you didn't get the story. Right? So that's La Chèvre de Monsieur Seguin, right? So you didn't know why you didn't get the story. It's French. So for most of you, it's your native language, right? What is missing? What do we need to understand the story? Yes? Pauses? Yes, exactly. Pauses. We need pauses. Anything else? Any other idea? Yeah? Tones. What is a tone? What do you mean by tone? Do you have any easy synonym? Melody? Or you mean the emotion? When you say tone, like you're strict or happy or I don't know. The melody, okay. The melody, yes. Listen to a second example and you tell me the difference, okay?
Last week my friend had to go to the doctor to have some injections.
What's the difference with the first example? You recognize the language, so that's English, so that's okay. Did you understand now? Yes, you did understand, so why? What's the difference between the two? So did we have pause? We did have pause? Yeah? You want to say something else? word stress. So we do have here accentuation, the rhythm of the language. So that's why you recognize the word, okay? But in this example, what we don't have is the melodies of the intonation. In the first one, you have nothing. So that's why you don't understand the message, you don't understand the meaning. In the second one, you have accentuation, a few pauses, but you have no melody, no intonation. So that's where you can hear something robotic, right? So that's the difference between the two. So if we sum up all these ideas and try to define prosody, what would you say? That prosody is linked to the oral language, it's a field of phonetics, and it's defined by several elements, such as intonation, accentuation, rhythm, speech rate, tempo, pauses, and quality of voice. So speech rate is the fact to speak fast or slow, okay? And tempo is the idea of having a certain number of syllables in 1 minute, for example. So how many syllables you pronounce in 1 minute, that's the tempo, okay? It's like in music. And the speech rate is just is fast or slow. The quality of voice is also part of prosody. So for example, is it rough, is it creaky, the kind of voice that the person has, because it also has consequences on the prosody of it, alright? So that's prosody. So prosody is very important because without prosody, you cannot really convey a message, you cannot really convey emotions. If you're happy, if you're angry, if you're sad, that's thanks to prosody that you can convey all these emotions. So it's useful. It also has discursive function, so it helps for the speech, right? When you're in a crowd and many people talking at the same time, you can understand what your friends or neighbor is saying, but you cannot understand the rest of the people, right? But what you can hear in this kind of brouhaha, right, is the prosody. What you have is a yeah, so you cannot distinguish the word, but you can still hear the prosody of the speech, right? Prosody is also the first thing you acquire when you acquire your native language. When you're a baby, the first thing you acquire is the intonation. I'm pretty sure you've heard the baby trying his voice, her voice, something like this, right? So that intonation is trying his voice through intonation, because it already has the intonation. And rhythm is the second thing, which is acquired. Babies like 3-4 months old are able to discriminate languages thanks to rhythm, because languages have different rhythm. For example, English is a stress time rhythm. It's stress time language. What does that mean? When you speak in English, you have stresses. Remember, a syllable which is more striking than the others. We talked about that last week. So these stresses comes out at a regular interval when you speak in English. For example, you say, I'm watching television. What and te. These are the bits, right? And these are coming at regular intervals. So the amount of time between two stresses are equal. I'm watching television, okay? In French, the rhythm is very different. What you have is syllables which are pronounced with the same, more or less, same equal amount of time. Je regarde la télévision. So you see that each syllable is pronounced, and the time to pronounce each syllable is more or less equal. So that's what we say that French is a syllable time language. So these give very different rhythm of the languages. So the baby, very young baby, is able to discriminate his own native language from other languages with a different rhythm. So for example, a French baby will be able to discriminate English. It's not my language. Thanks to characteristics, rhythmic characteristics. Of course, the baby won't label the language, right? Just know that it's different. Prosody is also the last thing you're going to lose when you get older. If you have to lose your speech, you're going to lose first the sounds, and then you're going to lose prosody. At the very end, you're going to lose prosody if you lose your language, right? Okay, so from all the elements that we talk about for prosody, for intonation, rhythm, pauses, tempo, etc., I'm going to focus on two main elements, rhythm and then intonation. Okay, so we start with rhythm. So two things about rhythm. The first one is word stress. So remember word stress? The idea that within a word, a syllable is more striking than the others. That's word stress. Within a word, the syllable is more striking than the other. So this syllable is stressed. So it's nothing to do with anxiety. It's accented. Okay? So that's word stress. So listen to the first example here, spoken by the native speaker, and you tell me which syllable is stressed. Okay? Comfortable. Comfortable. What would you say? Which syllable is stressed? Is it the first one, the second one, the last one? Yeah? The first one? Yeah? Comfortable. So when you say the word comfortable in English, you need to put stress, so energy, strength, on the first syllable. And the rest is spoken very quickly, so very shortly, and with the schwa. Remember the sound we talked about last week? That's comfortable. Okay? That's the English pronunciation. So that's word stress. Now, what's happened when a French speaker, what could happen when a French speaker speaks in English? We said we had different rhythm, right? So here is another example of it by a French speaker. Comfortable, comfortable. What's the difference here? Is it pronounced the same? No. So what's the difference? The stressed syllable is not the same. Did you recognize the stressed syllable? Well, the end, right? The end of the word, exactly. That's the end of the word which is stressed by this French speaker. What happens that in French, we have stress at the end of the word. All the words are stressed at the end. We don't have, except if you want to make an emphasis, like politicians, they do a lot of emphasis, so they put the stress on the first as well, the end and the first one, all right? But in French, the stress is at the end of the time. So what happens is that the French speaker have a tendency to put the stress at the wrong place and pronounce it with the stress at the end, of course. And what about the rest of the syllable? We say that in English, we have come, foot. What happens with the French speaker? Comfortable, what happens here? If you said about rhythm and the type of rhythm we have in French. Well, you can consider that each syllable is spoken loud. Each syllable is spoken with more or less equal time. And of course, at the end you have the lengthening. But comme, fort, right? Every syllable is spoken loud. So if you look at the drawing, you see that it takes much more time to pronounce the word by the French speaker than for the native speaker, because of this absence of syllables at the end. So that's word stress. So be careful when you speak English, try to find the place of the stress, and be careful with the other syllables, right? Second element for rhythm. Comfortable. Is what we call accentuation. So we have word stress and we also have accentuation in English. So what's accentuation? Well, it's exactly the same process than for the words, but at the level of the sentence. That is, when you consider the whole sentence, some words aren't made prominent, some words are accented, and others are not. The basic rule said that the lexical words are prominent. What is a lexical word? Well, it's a noun, a verb, an adjective, an adverb. That's lexical words. So they are accented. Okay? On the contrary, grammatical words are not accented. So determiners, articles, prepositions, etc., they're not accented. That's the basic rule, right? So here you have an example. Can you give me a list of the restaurants in the neighborhood? If we consider lexical words, which word will be accented? If you look for verbs, nouns, adjectives, so we're going to have give, list, restaurant, and neighborhood. So when you speak the sentence, when you speak out the sentence, we're going to hear give, list, restaurant, neighborhood, right? And the rest is very fast and less pronounced, less loud. So let's hear the native speaker.
Can you give me a list of the restaurants in the neighborhood? Can you give me a list of the restaurants in the neighborhood?
Okay, so you hear the striking words, yes? Now, what happens with the French speaker? So what's the difference? What happens for the French speaker? Yeah. What's the beginning of your sentence?
First part of the sentence is slower and it's popular in French.
Okay, so it's slower, it takes longer to pronounce the sentence. Yeah? Okay. Especially the beginning. That's true. And the reason for that is that everything is accented in French. So instead of saying, can you give me? Can you give? Can you give? Everything is accented. Okay? So this gives a different rhythm to the sentence. Okay? So again, that's the basic rule that you should follow and be paying attention when you speak English, to put prominence on certain words, but not all the words. Okay? Right. So that was for rhythm. Let's move on to intonation now.
Can you give me a list of the restaurants?
So intonation is composed of several elements. So we're going to write down all these elements and then we come back to them to explain them. Okay? So the first element is the tone unit. So tone unit is just a pause in the sentence. So we're going to come back on this, but the fact you have a pause or not in the sentence. The tonics. So the tonics, the main striking words in the sentence. There is one word which is more important than the others. That's the tonic. The tones. So So we're going to have different tones in English, which are sometimes different from French, for example, or other languages. Then we use the tones to have intonation patterns. That is the main melody of the sentence. And of course, because you have a certain intonation pattern in a sentence, a melody, well, you're going to have a specific emotion, a specific message to convey. So a particular attitude. So this is the attitudinal functions of intonation. So what intonation do you use to convey a specific attitude or emotion? So let's come back to tone units. So tone units, the fact you have a pause, a break in the sentence. The first sentence, you wrote the letter simply. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words. So 5 words is a short sentence. So most of the time in English, when you have 5 to 7 words, you pronounce them as one chunk. Okay, so one intonation unit. So you say you wrote the letter simply. You don't make any pauses. The tendency in French is the contrary. Tendency to have many pauses in the sentence. So, for example, he wrote the letter sadly. That's what we say in French. Of course, if the sentence is longer, you can have a pause in it. So, for example, they took the passengers who were injured to the hospital. So here you can have 2 intonation units. You're going to make a pause after injured, and then you have a second intonation unit. So the first one, they took the passengers who were injured to the hospital. So that's one possibility. Of course, you can have a break in another place. Why are tone units important? Well, if you look at the last example, you can put a pause in this example, and according to the pause you're going to make, the meaning is going to be different. So she hit the man with a stick. Can you find another meaning of the sentence according to the pause you're going to make when you pronounce it? Yeah? Yes, she uses the stick, right, to hit the man. Exactly. So you see that, did you hear what you said? No, you won't recap. So you have 2 possibilities of meaning here. The fact that she hit the man with a stick, she hit the man, but the man she hit has a stick in his hand. Okay, so if you make a pause after hit, that's the first meaning of the sentence. Okay? But if you say she hit the man, pause, with her stick, or the sentence has one chunk, she hit the man with a stick. Okay? It means that she uses the stick to hit the man. Okay? So that's the difference of meaning. So you see, according of your choice of your when you're going to breathe in the sentence, because that's all linked with the breathing, right? The meaning will be different. So, tonics. In each tone unit, you're going to have a tonic, a nucleus. That is, once you have your tone unit of the sentence, within this tone unit, you're going to have one word, which is very, very important, which bears the meaning of the sentence, which is called the tonic, the nucleus, that's noyau in French. There is a basic rule to find the nucleus, saying that in a neutral context, we say neutral when you have no emphasis, no specific message, it's You just give the information. In that case, the rule says that the last prominent, the last accented word is the tonic. So remember we said that lexical words are accented? Yes? So you need to find the last lexical word, and this word will carry the meaning of the sentence. So if we say, last night I went to the cinema, so you can have one intonation unit or two. You can say, last night I went to the cinema. Or you can say, last night I went to the cinema. Even if you have a comma, doesn't mean you're going to breathe, right? It's not because you have a comma, which is part of punctuation, so the written language. It doesn't mean that when you speak, you're going to have a pause. It's not an obligation. So, last night I went to the cinema. Cinema is a noun, it's a lexical word, it's accented. It will be tonic. So if you have to keep in mind one message from the sentence, it will be cinema. Okay? Now, when you have a non-neutral context, which means you want to say something particular, or an emphasis, or respond to something particular, in that case, any word can be the tonic, even grammatical words. Okay? So for the same sentence, you can say, last night I went to the cinema. If you put the tonic on I, it probably means that the person you're talking to didn't understand that it was you, but someone else. So last night I went to the cinema, then I is the tonic, and it's non-neutral. You say something specific here. Is it okay with this? The idea is clear, yeah? So you're going to look at the video and tell me why the nucleus is important.
Right. This is one of my favourite sentences of all time. Let me tell you why! Every time you say it, if you emphasise a different word, it changes the meaning of the sentence. I didn't say we should kill him. 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 It's really fun. Give it a go.
So what's the difference between all these sentences? So you have one sentence, and for each word, you can have a tonic on all of these words, right? What's the difference then if you put tonic on kill or on him or should? Why is it important to choose very well your tonic? Yeah. The tonic could be on say. That's one possibility. That's one possibility which is offered. What does that mean if you say, I didn't say we should kill him? What does that mean then? Yes? Absolutely. So, or you could have written it as well. You've meant it. So it's something underlying, right? There's an underlying message when you say so. If we follow the basic rule with the lexical words, I didn't say we should kill him. Well, kill should be the tonic, right? In a neutral context, it's on the action, so kill. But you see that I have the possibility to say, I didn't say we should kill him. Him is a grammatical word. But if I put the tonic on it, the meaning is different. It's not neutral. So we won't kill him, we're going to kill someone else. That's the meaning of it. So you see that according to the place of the tonic, the message is very different. The intention beyond is different.
Right.
So let's move on with the tones, the different tones that you have in English. voice. You have a high pitch, a mid pitch, or a low pitch. Okay? We all have that. That's universal. Then, according to the person, the pitch will be different. Some people have a high pitch, other a low pitch. It depends. But still, you have 3 different levels, and it will help building the melody when you speak. So, focusing on the tones, you have 6 types of melodic tones. 6 types of melodic tones. 4 types of simple tones. So simple tones, because it's just one simple tone, like a low fall. You go down with your voice. A simple low fall. Yes. No. That's a low fall. Then you have a high fall. You start very high and you go down very low with your voice. That's a tone that you use when you're surprised in English or when you want to express anger, for example. Yeah, like this. That's a very high fall, which is not the case in French. In French, you have a high rise when you're surprised, but not a high fall. Then you have a low rise. So, yes. A high rise. Yes. So that's the simple tones. Now we have 2 complex tones in English. So complex tones, we don't have that in French. Complex tones, the first one is a fall rise. It means that you're going to fall with your voice, you're going to go down and then up again. That's a fall rise. And then on the contrary, you have a rise fall. You go up with your voice and then down. Okay? So that's 6 specific tones. The fall rise is the tone which is the most used in English. You also have static tones. So when you speak, you cannot do tones, melodic tones all the time in the sentence. It would be too much. So you also have static tones. That is, you can start here, and then here, here, and then you go down. Or you have this, and then you go up. Okay? So you have one melodic tone and several static tones when you speak. Let's hear an example of a static tone with the word yes. So you see the blue line, that's the curve that represents the pitch movement of your voice. So that's a phonetic software representing the voice. If you remember well, the spectrograms. So here we have the melody.
Yes.
Yes, it gets at the same level, right? Same thing with question.
Question.
Question, it gets at the same level. It's your falling intonation now. So on the word yes, if you follow the blue line, it's going down, right?
Yes.
Yes. It goes down. Same thing with question.
Question.
Question. Now on the contrary, the same word with a rising intonation.
Yes.
You hear it? You hear the difference between the falling intonation and the rising? Yeah? Yes? Yes. Same thing on question.
Question. Question.
So question, you see the blue line, the pitch going up, yeah? And now, the intonation.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So you see that the melody is going down and up again. Yes. So it takes longer to pronounce this kind of tones because you have 2 tones. So it's longer when you speak. I didn't say that. Don't look at me this way. So this is the fall rise.
Question.
Question. Did you ask me a question? opposite emotions. For negative emotions, for example, when you're critical, when you criticize something, when you're reproachful, when you want to show disagreement or something wrong, or you don't like the idea. And on the contrary, you can also use Fulbright to show agreement on something, or when you give an encouragement, or when you're encouraging someone, you use the Fulbright as well. So same thing with the rise full, but the audio doesn't work. So the voice goes up and then down, so more like this, or fall. You go up and then down. So that's for the basic tones, right? Now, what do you do with the tones? You create the whole melody of the sentence. So here is an example with the whole sentence. If you look at the sentence, you're going to hear it in a few minutes. You will try to recognize the main intonation and the tonics of the sentence. Okay, so there is one intonation unit, so the sentence is pronounced as one chunk. Find the tonic and find the intonation. If you remember well, the intonation is on the tonic. Okay, the nucleus, the tonic, bears the main melody. Alright?
Can you tell me what's on television tonight? Can you tell me what's on television tonight? Can you tell me what's on television tonight?
So what would you say? What's the tonic, so the most striking word, and what's the melody which is used? Any idea? No one? So let's hear it again.
Can you tell me what's on television tonight?
So you can have a tonic on television, so the most striking word is on television and not tonight. And the melody is falling, and it's falling on television, and then tonight is static at the end. If you follow the blue line, the curve, you're going to see the falling melody, the line going down, and then tonight is static, low static. So let's hear it again. What's different? Is the tonic the same? Is the melody the same? So you hear something on tell, me, and what was the first one? What did you say at the beginning? Oh, the rising intonation, yeah? Exactly. So for the intonation, we have the contrary, a rising intonation. That's what happens in French. We're rising all the time. For all the questions we're asking, we're rising the voice all the time. And if you have decorative, most of the time we're rising as well. So that's the habits we have. So here the question again uses the rising tone, and you can see that in English it's not an obligation to rise the voice for questions. You have questions with falling tones. What's your name? I'm falling. I don't say what's your name. So it's falling intonation. So keep that in mind when you speak. So and the tonic is not on tell. What you heard is a very high pitch. She has a very high pitch, so it's striking, but it's not the tonic. But it's true that it's high. The tonic is on tonight, the very last word.
Can you tell me what's on television tonight? Can you tell me what's on television tonight?
Tonight. So that's the tonic. And with the telling, she's going so high that you hear it very well. I think it's tonic. What happens? Listen. Remember the explanation when I say that in French?
y a à la télévision ce soir? Vous pourriez me dire ce qu'il y a à la télévision ce soir?
So you see that when the sentence is spoken in French, via French, you have the rising intonation, and the tonic is soir, ce soir. So that's the same thing, the same explanation, the same structure for both sentences. So talking about learning a new language, you see that all these prosodic differences can create difficulties when you speak this foreign language, and especially between French and English. So for you as a student, you could think of different difficulties that you have, different constraints that you have, and we're going to mention 3 constraints here. The first one could be a physiological constraint, a physiological difficulty. What does that mean by physiological difficulty? I don't mean that you have a problem with your mouth, okay, it's not the point. We all have lips, tongue, teeth, nose, we all breathe, right? So remember all the elements used to articulate the sound. But if you remember well, some sounds of foreign language are very different from those of our native language. So when a position is specific and not used in native language, then you have physiological difficulty. If you remember well, we talked about the TH sound. You need to put your tongue in between your teeth, remember that? That's something we don't do in French. So this is a physiological constraint, physiological factor that you need to work on. The second constraint is a psychological constraint. Psychological constraint, what is it? Well, the first thing is, for example, the motivation. What kind of motivation do you have to learn a new language? It could be the fact that you like the language or not, the fact that you like the teacher or not, the fact that you like the course or not. So you see that the psychological factors are present all the time and will have an effect on your learning. The last constraint we're going to mention is a sociological constraint. That is the environment you are in to learn this new language. Did you travel? Will you travel or not? What kind of input do you have of the language? Do you have any input? So that's the environment that you have, okay, for the language. So these 3 factors can impede the learning process. There is something that you should keep in mind, you as learners of foreign languages. You have at least 3 languages, right? So you have your native language and you're learning 2 languages right now. So 3 languages, that's a lot. The best elements for learning a language, there are 2 best elements. The first one is the motivation. The motivation is the best factor to use the language. Well, you're going to say, well, that's maybe silly, but it's not. There was a study showing that adults and older adults were learning a new language and they had great capacity to learn this new language. They didn't have much difficulties. Why? Because they were highly motivated. And that was the difference with the children, with the kids. Most of the time you say, wow, I would like to be a kid so that I have my brain plasticity to learn any language, right? But that's not enough. If you have the motivation, no matter the age of learning the language, if you have the motivation, it will work, okay? So that's the first thing, motivation. And the second element, which is really important, is the daily input that you have of the language. The daily input and the need for the language. What is a daily input? You should ask yourself, how many magazines or books did you read this week? How many movies, series did you watch this week? How long did you speak English or Chinese or Spanish this week? So that's the input of the language. You have to read, to listen, to speak. If you don't have any input of the language, it doesn't work. You won't learn. lot of vocabulary, which is good. You're going to know words. For the exam, you're going to do the test, and you're going to know your words. And then what happens? You never use these words. You never write these words. You never read these words somewhere. So you're going to forget them. Okay? So once you have learned a word, you need to use it. So you need to create a context to use this word. You need to write it down. You need to use it in your writing. Otherwise, you're going to forget the language. So that's the daily input and the need for the language. If you don't need the language, that's the same thing. The learning process will be difficult. There are many kids, bilingual kids, so knowing 2 languages, forced to move somewhere else because of the parents' life. So they knew 2 languages, but when they moved somewhere else, one of this language wasn't taught there. So what happened? There was no need for the language. So they started forgetting this language. So if you have no need for the language, you will forget it as well. It won't help for the process of learning, right? So keep that in mind, you, learners of many languages, the daily inputs that you have for your languages and the motivation that you have, okay? We're done for today and we're done for the semester, so thank you for your attention. Wish you a last good week